This is Dan Schneider. On this Dan Schneider interview, I'll be speaking with Sean Goltz about artificial intelligence and slavery, and the conversation will begin in a moment. Sean Goltz is my guest. As I like to do, I want to give my guests a few minutes to describe who they are, what they do, and any relation they have to the topic, things they've written or spoken about. So, welcome, Sean. If you could give a little précis on who you are.
Sure, my name is Dr. Sean Goltz. I'm a senior lecturer at Edith Cowan University in Western Australia. I'm also a RegTech entrepreneur, a father, a husband, and a person of faith.
And you also live in Perth, Australia. About 6, 7 years ago, I interviewed a fellow from Perth. And actually, I've interviewed about a dozen people from Australia, although they're usually on the East Coast. Um,
Correct.
Welcome. So, what is your background in regards to computing, robotics, artificial intelligence? Are you someone who is involved in the marketing? Are you involved in the actual construction, the theoretical aspects? What background do you have in that regard?
So after practicing law as a law and technology lawyer in Israel, I went to Toronto, Canada to do my PhD in law, and the PhD was around virtual worlds of children. My interest was always around law and technology, and before the AI revolution started, I started looking at the use of AI both from a RegTech perspective and both from the ethical aspects. What I usually try to do is to learn lessons from ancient cultures and ancient wisdom. So when I've translated my PhD into a book, The Imaginationless Generation, around the harm to children's imagination from using virtual worlds, I was looking at the Tower of Babylon, for example, in the context of technology in the Bible. Then in an article we wrote around AI as sex bots and so on, we were looking at the rules of slaves in ancient Judaist literature. I'm currently looking at the comparison between the biblical flood and the climate crisis. So I like to try and draw lessons from ancient sources and wisdom towards our day and age.
Yeah, I think that the legal aspects of artificial intelligence have long been lost. You hear all this stuff. It's either going to be a utopian future where everyone is going to be sunning themselves on the beach while the robots do all the work, or it's the Terminator or other disaster scenarios. But it seems to me, and one of the reasons I want to talk about AI slavery is this comes down to personhood. What do we consider a person? In some nations, some animals have been given personhood. Corporations in the U.S. and other nations have, I think, been given personhood. There have even been some. I think in New Zealand, your neighbor, and also maybe in some of the Aboriginal lands in Australia. Even some rivers and forests and valleys have been given quote unquote personhood. Uh, so, what is your idea about personhood and how it relates to artificial intelligence?
Good question. So first off, I mean, this discussion was raised in the context of animals and the nature, which you've mentioned, and we also had a chapter in the recent book about real-world AI ethics that was written by one of the world experts on around animal abuse and AI, and also in the comparison between the flood and the climate crisis, I'm talking about um, animals abuse and so on. With regards to personhood, I think that I mean we've seen actually cases where I think it was Saudi Arabia or another country that basically gave citizenship to the robot and things like that. I think this is more of a game in that respect. I think that the real danger we're seeing with AI is not, as people imagine colorfully, the robots marching in the street, but rather, for example, AI hallucinations. So we're
Mm.
seeing a lot of AI hallucinations, especially in the legal field. And imagine what happened when a case or legislation, which is fake and created by a large language model, is being adopted into a decision by a judge. This means that this decision is from now on valid and real, even though it was never decided by a court of law. Now, if we assume that the rule of law is the basis of our society, this is already shaking the basis of our society. Another point to mention in the context of personhood is what we call in the article around sex bots the tragedy of the master. So once we start treating AI robots without the right dignity, first off, we may transfer this into humans, and we wrote about it in the article. And secondly, we're becoming cruel ourselves because we're treating this thing in cruelty. And I think we're already doing it with animals,
Yeah.
and we're certainly, according to evidence, we're doing it with sex bots as well.
Well, there was the United States science fiction series franchise Star Trek, and I believe it might have been in the Star Trek Voyager from the late '90s. There was an episode where they had, in this case, it was artificially intelligent holographs. A doctor who was the ship's doctor on that show, and they used that technology to basically make holographic slaves. By reprinting, I guess, or whatever the term is, that person. And uh, one of the lines that I remember sticking with me is that all societies have always looked for disposable people, and if we're looking at creatures, beings, aliens, whatever we want to call them, and we're saying they're nothing but toasters with a flare, we're going to find them disposable. We're going to send them down into the mines the way we did poor people. We're going to send them to do all the dangerous work. And, for those who are worried about robot rebellions or whatnot, it would seem to me if these creatures are at least the equal, if not superior, in some aspects of human beings intelligence wise, forget about just their rights. It just makes sense to treat them with decency so that you don't have, an uprising or something. And yet, this seems to, when I you see online people arguing at these various conferences, I don't see much of that being argued, at least not intelligently or specifically.
I think we've seen some manifestation of that in popular movies, like the one there's She, and there's other movies that show
Yeah.
us how AI allegedly can trick humans into doing whatever they want. That's one aspect of the other aspect I would think about is that it's not necessarily about whether there is a big discussion around whether technology has its own agenda or not. So many people would like to believe that technology is just a tool and it does whatever you tell it to do. Others, like Jacques Ellul, for example, are arguing that technology has its own agenda. And I think this applies to AI in the same level. AI technology has its own agenda, and we've seen that manifested, for example, with the software used in US courts to determine bail and to determine early release from jail, where research showed that, in fact, the software was biased against black people, against
Yeah.
African Americans. So certainly there is an agenda here, and I think one of the suggestions that we try to make is that AI will have a, a definite lifespan, because when we relied on the ancient story of Adam and Eve, when God said, well, now he ate from the tree and he's going to live forever and he's going to be just like that, just like us, the lesson we need to learn is that those machines should not live forever. Now, that's kind of counterintuitive in the sense that when you build a machine, you want it to last for as much as possible. But when you build a machine that is so smart, and it's actually smarter than humans in some respects, then you don't want it to live forever. You actually want it to live for a set period of time because then you have more control.
Yeah, that seems. I think another thing with AI that I found is that in the utopian take on it, you know, you hear, well, we want to get to artificial intelligence, then to AGI, general intelligence, then ASI, super intelligence, and then all of a sudden everything's going to be wonderful. Well, I don't understand how they can say that because, okay, you're not going to have faster than light travel 10 minutes after ASI comes online. You're not going to have the solution to legal issues and this and that when it comes online. It seems to me the more likely outcome, legally speaking, is we're probably going to end up with a society where we have three distinct tiers. And not, I shouldn't say tiers because that implies a hierarchy, three distinct types of citizens: natural humans, you and I, and all of the humans in history so far; artificially intelligent robots, especially those that are humanoid. I think a lot of AI is probably going to be on screens and going to be Roombas and self driving cars. And I guess we would have to give them a sort of personhood as well if they are truly sentient. But it seems to me the middle ground we're going to have cyborgs. We're going to have human beings. There are lots of young kids who want to hook up and they want to get brain implant. And I think that's something that against the dystopian future is that you're going to have there's going to be more cyborgs than artificial AI robots and natural humans. Us natural humans will probably in a few hundred years end up like the Amish, the here in the U.S. The outliers that still want to farm, and we'll be considered the way we look at hunter-gatherer tribes now.
Yeah, most certainly. I think you're right in that respect. I already hear people saying that. I think we're already overoccupied by technology, and we're talking here about technology which is much stronger. I can tell you that there is literature arguing that in the Neuralink experiment, which is something that is very similar to what you're talking about, they're doing experimentation with animals, and those experimentation are causing animals just terrible things. They do to themselves terrible things. So whether the technology eventually will evolve to the point that it would actually be useful, so to speak, that's a different question. But I think that this intervention with the human being is very dangerous. I think it will have side effects. It will have consequences. The same way that psychologists argue that our fight or flight system is not adapted to the modern world and we're not adapted to move at a 100 kilometer per hour in our car and so on and so forth. I think we're not adapted to those alteration and addition to our humanity, to our personhood in a way that it would be a machine. And I'm not even getting into the issues of privacy and whether it can be remotely controlled. And there's movies about those type of things. So certainly the danger is there. And I think one of the aspects of the danger is this endless pursuit after technology that will enhance us. So we've seen that with the virtual worlds that actually didn't really succeed. So I don't know if that is facing the same future. But certainly it's a very powerful technology. It has its downsides, AI, but it is a powerful technology.
Well, on the on the plus side, rather, I don't know if you ever got this American television show in Australia back 50 years ago. There was a show in the U.S. called The $6 Million Man. Starred a fellow named Lee
For
Majors.
sure,
Yeah, we have the technology. We can rebuild
we
it.
can
We can make
rebuild it.
him bigger, faster, stronger. Blah blah. And I think there is that allure. And you just have to look at all the goddamn Hollywood superhero movies that are churned out. Human beings are tired. We don't want to be human beings anymore. We want to be like the gods. We want to be like Superman, or even, at the worst, Wolverine, or whatever the hell it is. We want to have blades that come out of our knuckles, or whatever.
I,
And that
I, I,
go ahead.
I think you're already seeing it in the sense that young people today, not only young, they have a question, they go to ChatGPT or other large language model, and it doesn't matter whether it's an informative question, whether it's an emotional question, whether, and we've seen those chatbots advising people to commit suicide, providing them advice how to do that. So I think it's already there in that respect. It's just not yet embedded in the body and in the brain.
Yeah, I know. A couple of months ago, I was typing something in, and I don't use the AI feature on Google. I just look to the facts. It's like I avoid Wikipedia, I avoid AI. But I was in preparation for another interview. I was typing something about AI, large language models. Will they fail or something? And I got the weirdest answer back from the AI. It's like, you seem like you're depressed. It's like it was trying to psychoanalyze me when I was just asking a question for basic links about stuff. But regarding LLMs, large language models, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. From what I understand and have read, this is not true AI as portrayed in science fiction. In that if an AI is speaking to you, it's basically tossing a billion darts for each word that's coming up, and it does it so quickly that it can construct a sentence that can pass the Turing test. However, it doesn't necessarily really truly understand a lot of idioms that are not standard language, standard lingual models, and whereas with true AI that could eventually lead to AGI and ASI, that is something that we aren't as close to as we think, which now leads people to talk about the AI bubble. What is your take on the large language models versus quote unquote real AI?
Well, I don't know if in terms of the technology and this method, it's very different. I agree with you that it doesn't really think, it doesn't understand. It just scramble words and provide you with the answer. But it's very bright in that respect. And interestingly, just to give you an example of how technocrats are seeing that. So recently there was an article published by the Samsung AI Center in Warsaw, and the author was talking about AI hallucinations, and he was talking about the fact that what is on one side of the coin could be considered hallucinations, on the other side of the coin could be considered imagination.
Mm.
Now, I find this very dangerous and very problematic because those if there's one thing AI does not have is imagination, and it will never have imagination. And this is
Well, maybe
something I've
not.
read.
It won't have human imagination. It could develop something down the line, don't you think?
I don't think so. I'll
No.
tell you why. I mean, I've written about imagination development in children in the context of virtual worlds. The imagination developed from taking something and using it for something else. Now, this is a human capacity. It's something that is innate in humans, is developed in humans, and is actually being impaired by technology because technology is all about efficiency. It's so when people tell me, well, this was done by an AI artist and it's a piece of art, I think this is doing injustice to art because first off, I mean, it's a different discussion, but what is art and what are the forms of art? But large language models and AI in general, as we know it today, just picks up the dots as you've described and put them together in some way that may look interesting, may look beautiful, but it's not the imagination. And to say that the opposite side of hallucination is imagination is a very dangerous argument, especially in law. In other fields, maybe less, but in law, it's very dangerous.
Also, I noticed because I work in retail here in the U.S. and the company that I work for uses some AIs to order, and the AIs don't have hunches. They don't have the experience. They don't know how to take experience. They don't necessarily currently learn from it. For example, if let's say I were to order 100 boxes of whatever for a sale at half price off, I'll know that the last time that I ordered that we threw away 30% of the stuff and had to mark it down. but those marked down price stuff counted still as sales. But the AI doesn't take that into account, and it'll see, oh, since more time has passed, it's probably and maybe it's a slightly better sale. We're going to order twice as much, and what ends up we end up throwing more of it away, and so it seems to me that one of the big hurdles for truly artificial intelligence and sentience is for the AIs to learn and have hunches and to be able to take in things that don't appear in spreadsheets but are there in day-to-day activities that you learn just by what they call body memory, or just by the memory that isn't even conscious in a human being. They don't seem to have that.
I think, one of the things that is important to mention in the context of this discussion is the very heavy cost to the environment by artificial intelligence. So we're talking
Energy, right?
Energy, we're talking power that is usually made from fossil fuels. We're talking about water, which is cooling water.
Yeah.
So there's in the context of the climate crisis, a machine or a technology that consumes so much energy is a bit problematic, because as smart as it is, and those people, there are people that would like to think that this is ushering the era of prosperity and so on. But by the time we'll have the era of prosperity due to AI, we wouldn't have a world anymore. So I mean, people like Elon Musk may say, well, by then we will be living on a different planet. But I don't buy those ideas. I even think they're ridiculous, in the sense that if you have so much money, why don't you improve this world? Why would you try to go to another world? It's so capitalistic. It's so like, okay, we've done with this world, we've ruined it, now go on. It's written in the Midrash that when God created man, he created Adam. He took him over all the trees of the Garden of Eve and told him, look at all the things I've created. I've created them for you, because if you destroy them, there will be no one that will mend that. And that's what we're doing. We're creating another technology that keeps consuming more energy, that basically cause people to lose their jobs, and all for the sake of basically economy. So this is done for money.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
it's the idea of eternal growth. But I mean, we live on a finite planet, and even if we were to, in the next 100 years, colonize the solar system, and then the next few nearest star systems, and however many decades or centuries it would take, uh, where does it stop? I mean, just endless growth. I mean, for what purpose? To what end? You know?
exactly. I think, as any technology, this is not necessarily promoting humans in any way. In fact, it is part of the destruction of our planet, and is being used by rich people to make more money. I'm not saying that all the uses of AI are problematic and negative and so on, but the nature of the beast itself is problematic because of the levels of energy that it consumes, the water that it consumes, and also, I haven't seen much news about the good things that AI do, apart from some kind of a potential economic engine. There was a lot of promise around healthcare and so on, in the use of AI, but this seems to be shying away compared to other uses of AI.
So if eventually it's legislated that certain artificial intelligence, if not all of them, have personhood, to get to your sex bot research, it seems to me this is also a dangerous thing. On the one hand, for example, I grew up in a very good fellas neighborhood. I knew about prostitution and blue areas where prostitution would be legalized, and violence generally goes down. And when young males can shoot off a load, whether it's in a woman or in a sex bot, that might make them happier. But on the other hand, there's this delusion that if we allow AIs, especially the sex bot AIs, to be persons, they'll be able to consent to be married to certain people. And I think that psychologically this is going to screw up a lot of things, because how are we going to know if this sex bot who has been ordered, let's assume you order, Mary Jane, with 38, 24, 30, measurements, is she does she really love me, or is she programmed to love me? And when we have our first argument and she beats the crap out of me because she's faster, stronger, bigger than I am, it seems to me that that's going to be very problematical, not because of the legal issues of personhood, but the psychological effect. I mean, you mentioned how just these large language models have been giving advice to these incels or neckbeard type people to kill themselves because they're worthless, because they spend 16 hours a day just chatting with the bots. What is your take on sex bots?
So I mean, just to mention, first off, in a way, it's already happening in the sense that there's a very famous photograph collection that shows people with their sex dolls, but those may not be yet AI fueled sex dolls, but their relationship are real and they're very close. Secondly, we can consider issues like, for example, inheritance. So imagine the manufacturer of an AI fueled chatbot will design it in a way that if the person that bought it is passed away, it can argue that it has some part in his inheritance and it needs to inherit him. So that's another thing. I want to mention in this respect an article we wrote about the clash of empires. So about 50 years ago, a person called Globe wrote an article called The Fate of Empires, in which he followed ancient cultures and ancient empires and came up with the calculation that an empire's lifespan is 250 years. Now, if you look at the US, you can certainly see how after 250 years, the empire is basically decaying. Now, what we argued in the article was that there's going to be first the empire of technology, and I think we've seen that in the US as well, with Elon Musk acting as the Department of Government Efficiency and so on. And that will be the first empire in history that is led not by a nation state. So we've seen tech billionaires and billionaires in general, maybe we can count Donald Trump as well, leading the empire. Then it's going to be the AI empire, and the AI empire will be the first empire in human history that is not actually led by humans, and that is not nation state anyway. So I think we're already kind of living in the AI empire age, where AI is the one that actually is ruling the steps and so on. I mean, if you even look at the modern leaders' use of technology, and just for the sake of the argument, let's say that when Donald Trump is writing his tweets on Truth Social, he's using AI to draft the things that he's writing. So you already can see the impact of the technology. So going back to your question around sex slaves and the fact that it's impacting us as humans. So there is those counter arguments that you've made in terms of the catharsis theory, that if people will use bots they will not use human sex slaves and so on. I don't think so. I think they're going to use both.
Yeah.
And they're just going to treat humans worse, because those are things they can do to the AI, and then you can replace it and no one complains and there's no claims and there's no criminal record and so on. But then on the sense of imitation and learning, you'll just apply this to humans as well.
It seems to me that whether or not AI can ever achieve AGI and ASI, it's already doing a lot of damage in dumbing down human beings. And this actually goes from before artificial intelligence in the last few years became such a hot buzzword. You look at what social media has done in the last 15, 20 years. You know, the social media, oh, it's going to help us be more informed, make better decisions. No, you have young men that are just whacking off most of their day. You have young girls just going online, getting makeup tips to get the better boys, that the ones that aren't whacking off online. It's just very odd. But the larger trend, even beyond just sex bots, to me, seems that in the utopian view of AI, we have superannuated humanity. You know, being able to follow their dreams. I want to go up Mount Everest. I want to cross the Amazon. I want to, you know, whatever, cross the outback or whatnot, and yet. I'm sorry. And yet it seems that in this all, what happens to purpose? For human beings. If we talk about making everything so easy, most people, for better or worse, are wrapped up in their jobs. You used to have a shoemaker who would take pride in making shoes. Now, as odd as it might sound, there are computer programmers that their whole identity is, I worked on developing the Sega 51 game back in 2007 or whatnot, and it was a big success. I can understand the want to make things easier, but this idea that everyone is on a permanent vacation seems to me a recipe for making us into Eloi, and the AI may be the Morlocks.
Well, there is a famous picture where you see a homeless person in San Francisco sitting on the ground near a bus station where there's an advertisement of a company that tells you, hire our AI, you don't need to hire humans anymore. So whether this will lead to eternal vacation, as some, people would like to think, or whether it would lead actually to mass unemployment and increase the gaps between the rich of the poor, I would probably say the latter is the one that is going to happen in that respect. So, and with respect to meaning, one of the things that have been said in the context of the reasons for the flood, which we create an analogy to today in terms of why did it happen? Why the climate crisis happened? Because of our low morals, because of humanity's low morals, and the use of technology, because that amplifies the low morals and their impact. And so one of the things that was said was that the people forget their purpose. They forgot why they're here. Now, will AI pray for you? Will it replace you in the daily prayers? Will it go to the church for you? Will it do those things? And if it would do those things, does it matter? So I would say no, because those are the things that makes us unique as humans. And I think in a way, what we're doing is we're franchising our humanity to AI. AI will do it. AI will pray for us. AI will go to church for us. AI will raise our children. AI will do everything. And we can just connect ourselves to this machine that will let us live forever, never be hungry, never be bored. And, what kind of life is that?
I mentioned Star Trek, the franchise, the movie franchise, TV franchise. And I remember one episode, I forget which show it was. It might have been the newest one, Strange New Worlds or something. And one of the characters was talking about how wonderful it's called the Federation, for those who don't know, was. And I thought that I've always thought that Star Trek was actually dystopian. I'm not talking about the bad guys, the Borgs or the Klingons or whatnot, but the actual Kirk, Spock, Picard Federation. Because in this episode, someone says, "Oh, in the 24th or whatever century it is that they're set in, they don't even go to the bathroom. They have the machine that can just teleport the feces out of their rectum or their colon." And I'm thinking to myself, doing this, my God, uh, this is a society that has degenerated so much that their sphincters probably don't even work anymore. Imagine if the teleporters all went online and they wouldn't even know how to pass gas, much less a well deserved pizza.
No, I think your point about being degenerated is a valid point in the sense that the general expectation is that AI will do everything for us, and we will live in this utopian world where we don't need to do anything. Where in fact, what you're seeing in the world right now is the collapse of democracies. You're seeing the preference of AI over human beings, and I think at the bottom line, you're seeing we have issues with morals. This is why this world is being destroyed. This is why animals are going extinct. What are we going to do? We're going to create AI that will mimic those animals, or are we going to use DNA to recreate them? And it's people. I think people tend to think that technology always has the solution, and I think that's a very wrong perception. There's a story in the Kabbalah about the generation before the flood, and it says that they knew the secrets. They knew how to deal with the angel of death and with the angel of fire, and they knew how to deal with the angel of water, but they didn't realize that God is the one that is orchestrating everything, and then they were lost. And I think we're with technology in the analogy, we're in the same position. We think we know how to cause rain, and we think we know how to stop fire, but we don't realize that we're destroying this world. And it's like someone cutting the branch they're sitting on, and we're saying, yeah, this is great technology. Let's keep cutting the branch we're sitting on until we fall.
So, what is your idea of a sort of answer for that? I mean, do we legally approach it and put corporations on notice? I mean, we should have guardrails. When you talk about AI that hallucinates, God forbid you have an AI in charge of missile defense systems. There's a flock of seagulls flying overhead. We think it's a Russian fighter or a Chinese fighter. Boom, World War III. Well, we don't have to worry about the robots taking over because there's going to be no human beings to rule.
True, true, true. Yeah, I think, I mean, it's hard to discuss this thing from a government regulation perspective, because I think, as I mentioned earlier, with this clash of empires, it's not clear anymore who's in charge. The fact that the American administration is pretending to be in charge doesn't necessarily mean it is in charge. I don't think it's in charge. And you can see that apart from the European Union, there's not much legislation around AI, and even with the European Union, the legislation is fairly moderate and specific and so on and so forth. So one of the things I would say is that legislation is not necessarily the answer. One of the things that I've mentioned is, for example, limiting the lifespan of those machines, of those computers. Another one would be, for example, to make it mandatory to implement in those GPUs, the graphic processors that are driving this AI, to implement in them some guardrails around AI hallucinations. And this is not too difficult at all. I in fact, am working on a project, on a tool to detect AI hallucinations. So it's not so difficult to do so. I think, it's important to say that the AI revolution is more around data than AI. AI is more the processor, and the data is the thing that makes a difference. Now, if you see the chart of what data is fueling AI, you see that Reddit, for example, is one of the main contributors. Now, is the data in Reddit accurate or not? That's a different question. But there's so many sources of accurate data that are not always considered or doesn't get the priority they should get. So I think it has to do a lot with the data. It has to do with the lifespan. Those are things that can assist in that respect. And Yeah, I think that those things could be helpful.
So when you're talking about lifespan limitations on AI, if an AI gets personhood, you're basically asking them to volunteer to end their lives. You know, it's basically a suicide for that AI. You know, I mean, yes, we could repurpose their arms, or we could repurpose their circuits or whatnot, uh, and make, you know, or we could just wipe them out, and on the same AI we could make, you know, Bob Jones, the AI who was a welder or whatever, we could make, just wipe it out, and make it, you know, Susie Smith, the gourmet chef.
It's more. I mean, if you take the biblical analogy, it's more about, okay, this machine can evolve thus far, and that's it. So we've created AI much like that God created us. And God said, you're not going to live more than 80 years, 90 years, whatever. We should probably do the same. Now, there's technical issues here. Are you taking the brain and then moving it to another machine and keeping the learning and so on?
Yeah.
That's a different question. But if you try to draw lessons from the biblical analogy, this is certainly the 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 step to take
Well,
to limit.
that reminds me of the old sci-fi book and film Logan's Run, where they, I think it was at the age of 30 in the book, and I think it was at the age of 21 or 24 in the film, where everyone had to submit to be destroyed so that the next generation would come along. I would think that though, if we grant personhood, this would be something that seemingly is antithetical to the notion. Because one of the reasons people want AI, it seems, Ray Kurzweil, the, I call him, I think he's a lunatic, with Google. You know, he basically thinks that he can resurrect his father and all his friends and whatnot by feeding in enough information. Even if you could know everything that happened in every goddamn waking second, not to mention the sleeping seconds of dreaming, in someone's 70-year life, that's not going to give you the same person. But the dream seems to me that a lot of human beings want to be able to take their brains. You know, people, if you remember the cryonics movement where people froze their heads, they want to take their brains, plop it into a machine, and now be, you know, Gigantor, the space age robot, or whatever it is.
And live forever
Yeah.
and live forever. They want to live forever, for sure, for sure. And I think this also begs the question of, are we going to, I mean, we're already in an energy crisis and a climate crisis. What will happen when those machines are going to, let's assume we're going to give them personhood, they're going to live forever, they're going to multiply and multiply. And as everything or anything, it works on energy.
Mm.
And so, we're already in a situation where we're exhausted all the free energy that is available, and we keep exhausting it. And so I think, in a way, we're destroying the real world we're living in favor of this imaginary technological world we want to live in. And I think the main reason is money. It's greed. It's all about greed. There's nothing really beneficial in those machines. I mean, they make it more efficient. They make things more efficient, but the human is left aside. And that's one of the lessons of the Tower of Babylon, which was the first time where humans used technology, is that, the story of Babylon says when they were bringing the bricks up, when a brick fell and broken, they were crying and saying, how are we going to get another brick? But when a person fell and died, they didn't care. And that's the age we're living in. It's all about technology. Humans are secondary, they're less important. And that is being manifested in our morals.
Well, there's the old saying, the capitalist knows the price of everything but the value of nothing. And that seems to me the way we're approaching AI. And the troubling part, the biggest troubling part, there's many troubling parts, but the biggest one to me is the way we're sort of blundering towards it. It's like, well, let's not put on the safeguards. Let's just see where the technology takes us. And I think this juvenile approach to it is because of these flights of fancy that science fiction, in terms of films, in terms of comic books, in terms of whatnot, has contributed that we tend to feel that it is always onward and upward. That it's Excelsior, Excelsior, Excelsior. That you can't have any period in life where you have a 50 or a 70-year moratorium where you look back at society. Where are we? Where are we going? Maybe we should all get together at the UN and talk about if we're going to go to Mars before we fuck that planet up. Maybe we put in guardrails that the minute we find some maybe remnant, even if it's just microbes on Mars, we have to put in safeguards that we don't destroy that. And in the same way, we can look at it because really, when we talk about artificial intelligence, they may as well be from another planet if they are alien intelligences, because they're not going to think like us. Yes, these large language models may, but what's to say? What's to say that artificial intelligences, are going to think in the same ways, to view things in the same ways? If they are going to be so superior in so many ways, they would, by definition, be alien to us.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, that this notion of thinking when it attributes to AI is a bit problematic because I don't think AI is thinking. What it does is it takes massive amounts of data and comes up with some kind of a puzzle that would answer most technical questions. But between that and thinking, between that and imagination, I don't think it's there. I think it's the imagination of those people that would like to see it there that is being projected as something that is there. But and it's very tricky and very problematic to explain, especially to young people, why is it so challenging? Why is it not really thinking? Why is it a very technical act that is being done for the sake of efficiency, for the sake of money, for the sake of, but not for the purpose of thinking, not for the purpose of morals, not for those purposes for which we are human. So in a way, and I think that goes back to the tragedy of the master we mentioned in the Sexbot article, is that by creating those technologies, we're dehumanizing ourselves. That's probably the danger in that respect.
Yeah, I also think that a lot of the fears that we have of AI, there are a lot of things that there are to fear, but I think there are benefits. But we always, as human beings, project monsters into the other, and we're creating another other out there, and it's one that we don't really want to get too close to or acknowledges the other, because we are the creators, and if they fail, we failed, because we are the father of this technology, or the parents.
Yeah, I mean, in some respects, it's already failing, where it's sucks up so much energy and water and so
Yeah.
on. It is a failure. You would expect a world in a climate crisis to do whatever is possible to reduce energy, but what are we doing? We're increasing the energy.
Yeah.
That by itself is so ridiculous. It's so not logical that I see that as one of the main problems that people don't even relate to.
Well, it seems to me that, and I know far less about this than someone like you. It seems that uh, rather than being the early guides to a utopia, their very presence, the very use of this energy consumption, is going to necessitate, and I've said this, a world war like effort that's going to take decades to mitigate and then hopefully reverse global warming. I mean, in another 10 years, we're going to find out that we passed the barrier for getting global temperatures down, probably back in 2005 or something, because we're always behind. We're never accurate in that way. And we're going to have to use all of this technology to clean up after ourselves. So it seems to me that there's no guarantee that in 2100 or 2125 we're going to be substantially better. Yes, we'll have nice shinier toys and whatnot, and we'll have children who can read Moby Dick just by plugging it into their head or whatnot, probably. But it doesn't seem to me that society is guaranteed to be any particularly, in any sense, better than what we have now.
I think, it's interesting to think about AI as something we created that is fueled by energy and is going to consume this energy. And much the same that we've consumed this energy as humans with cars, with machines, with pollution, with water, with the seas, with the animals and all that. AI is going to do the same thing, even worse because it doesn't have any conscience. So perhaps, I think this is something that we may have should have said earlier in this discussion is the conscience. And the conscience is usually what separates humans from machines. And it doesn't matter how smart AI is going to be, it's not going to have a conscience. In the biblical story of Adam and Eve, when God created Adam, it says that he blew the spirit into his nose. So it's like you take a robot and it just lies on the ground, doesn't have anything, doesn't have a brain or a soul, and then you blew into it. But the difference is that we don't have the breath of God. We have the breath of human, and the breath of human is so much, limited and full of interests, and usually driven by people that has the money, that are greedy. And so we're kind of creating a worse version of ourselves.
Yeah.
That the only thing it does is it consumes energy and it outputs things that doesn't really have any meaning.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, given the leadership that we've had throughout human history, it seems that the people who have the least amount of conscience are the most successful in gaining power. But just if we could, do you have any thing that before we wrap up, you can end on a positive note? What do you think is something positive about artificial intelligence, especially if it's something that you were not expecting?
Well, one thing I can say is that it can turn unstructured data into structured data. So if you use data for a good purpose, like we're doing so I'm running a startup called Regnet.ai, which is collecting all the legislation around the world, running through machine translation, and then offering it to the users. In the past, people would tell me this is unstructured data. If humans didn't work on it, it doesn't worth anything. Today with AI, you can structure this data. So I think on a positive note, I think AI is a data structuring tool, and it should stay like that. That's what I would say.
Well, I want to thank you for spending almost an hour speaking about it, Sean Goltz. Uh, uh, I will link. Do you have a university page, or no? Do you have a page I can link to?
Yeah, you can link to my university page
Okay.
or to Regnet. You can link to Regnet.ai if you want.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and you have a good day.